Heartbreak for England, ecstasy for Spain, the new world champions. But while this World Cup will be remembered for the stories, it was also the tournament when the world took notice, and women's football was changed forever. This is the story of how the sport worldwide will never be the same again. $1.7 million tickets were sold for the World Cup in Australia and New Zealand, smashing the record of 1.3 set in Canada back in 2015. It was also the first tournament expanded to 32 participating teams. But going into the tournament, discussions were centred on who wasn't there, and the prevalence of ACL injuries among the game's star players. England alone were missing Leah Williamson, Fran Kirby and Beth Mead. Vivian Miedema, all-time leading goalscorer in the WSL and the record scorer for the Netherlands, also missed the competition. And Haitian player Jennifer Limage suffered the same injury in her country's very first game. FIFA's expansion of the Women's World Cup meant that this year there were 8 teams making their first appearance. One of the debutantes, Morocco, surprised the world by actually making it out of the group stages. And there was a story within a story. One of Morocco's players, Noualia Benzina, made history by becoming the first player to wear a hijab at a World Cup. But World Cup 2023 was also notable for the high standard of performance from outside the traditional powers. Colombia and Australia both had excellent tournaments. New Zealand also pulled off an almighty shock in their first game, beating Norway 1-0. And the tournament saw 2 other African teams qualify into the knockout round. Nigeria and South Africa each advanced. Writing for The Athletic, Tamara Griffin described their progress as having shown the rise and potential of women's football in Africa. Jamaica also qualified, becoming the first Caribbean nation to reach the knockout phase of the Cup. It was a highly significant achievement in that context, and especially given that the Jamaican Football Federation had slashed its pre-tournament funding, and that the players had needed the financial assistance of both the Bob Marley Foundation and Adidas on their road to the tournament. They of course weren't alone in having issues with their federations. Heading into this World Cup, broadcaster Flo Lloyd-Hughes reported that South Africa, Haiti, Nigeria, as well as Canada, Spain, France and England were all involved in disagreements with their governing bodies. But on the pitch, this was the World Cup of goalkeeping. Athletic journalist Kiefer O'Neill wrote in 2022, "Goalkeeping errors have been used to undermine the women's game and the athletes who play." But the tournament saw a new level of respect for the world's best keepers. Australia goalkeeper Mackenzie Arnold became a national hero during the penalty shootout against France. Alyssa Nair was the first goalkeeper to take and score a penalty in a men's or women's World Cup. And England's Mary Earps went public about her disappointment with Nike's refusal to sell her goalkeeper top and led a public outcry. The manufacturer chose not to sell Earps' shirt on the basis that goalkeepers did not form part of its commercial strategy. Sweden's Zecira Musovic impressed the world with her performances, and Spurs' Rebecca Spencer kept a clean sheet throughout Jamaica's group stage games. That game also saw iconic Brazilian player Marta crash out of her last international tournament early. And she wasn't the only early departure. The tournament saw powerhouse nations dispatched long before the final rounds. Shockingly, former champions Germany went out in the group stages. Reigning 2-time champions, the US women's national team were knocked out by Sweden on penalties in the round of 16. It was a moment of high drama, as the world waited for goal line technology to confirm that Lena Hurtig's penalty had in fact crossed the line. And it had by a millimetre. It condemned the US to the worst World Cup performance in their history, creating a sense of crisis in the process. Writing for The Athletic, Meg Linehan explained that the early departure had raised massive existential questions about America's ability to keep up moving forward. As much as US soccer has always said that it set the bar for international women's soccer, Linehan wrote, the bar has been raised on them. And in the aftermath, ex-President Donald Trump tried to reignite old battles with US women's national team player Megan Rapinoe by tweeting, "The quote, shocking and totally unexpected, end quote, loss by the US women's soccer team to Sweden is fully emblematic of what's happening to our once great nation under crooked Joe Biden. Woke equals failure," said Trump. "Nice shot, Megan. The USA is going to hell. MAGA." Rapinoe announced her retirement from international football before the tournament, and on her departure from the game, called on the sport to keep growing. "The kids are taking over. We've had some of the best on and off the field that the game has ever seen," she wrote. "And now it's time for us to move on, and time for the new ones to cement themselves." This historic win for Spain's women belongs to their players. But growth has been the theme of this tournament. With its record attendances and viewing figures and unprecedented levels of interest, this was the moment when it became clear that women's football worldwide would never be the same again. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.